Hello everyone, it's Turin here, and today guys, I'm here with another Total War Warhammer online commentary. In this battle, I'm going to be playing the Vampire Counts led by the mighty Helman Ghorst, and I'm going to be facing off against the Empire, who's actually led by Volkmar the Grim, so a nice thematic matchup from the Grim and the Grave DLC. So for my front line, I do have a mixture of Skeleton Warriors and Graveguard, so both of them are pretty good choices. Skeleton Warriors don't have the best stats, obviously, but you know, when buffed right now actually by the Corpse card, they're pretty formidable, but regular Skeleton Warriors out here on the flank do have about 20 melee attack, 24 melee defense, and 26 weapon strength, so honestly, that's enough to deal with spears and halberds and swordsmen and all those type of units, and they're pretty cheap. I mean, at only 300 resources. On top of that, I did mix in some Graveguard who are very, very good against Empire. They trade extremely well against most troops, except greatswords, obviously, because they don't, unless you bring the armor-piercing variant, but for the most part, these guys will trade very, very well with low-tier troops in the front line, and even against Graveguard they will. So against swordsmen, for example, they're going to have 38 weapon strength and get a very, very good bonus versus infantry of 8, which is huge. So against Empire infantry, they're very, very high value, I think. In the back, I do have the mighty Helman Ghorst. So Ghorst has a bunch of different effects, actually, and I had to look at it before this. So I did get the Liber Noctis, which actually gives him a ton of winds of magic, but it actually hurts himself, which is just so bad. And then on top of that, he does have the Awaken from the Grave, so he can either summon a White King or 2 groups of Graveguard. Aside from that, he does have a lot of the traditional abilities of Corpse Cart. He has like a healing ability. He does have Master of the Dead here. And on top of that, he has Vigor Mortis. So 8 melee defense, 8 melee attack. And I think there's another one over here. So yes, the Unholy Lodestone, which again heals as well. So a lot of good value from him. One of the biggest issues is that he's extremely slow and extremely squishy. So in a lot of matchups, like if my opponent over here had decided to bring like a flying Empire Goon Squad, it's very, very hard to protect him from that. So thankfully, he did bring Volkmar the Grim for a nice thematic matchup. On top of that, I do have a Necromancer with Raised Dead, just so I can kind of get the Graveguard and some zombies. I do have some Cryptors here in the back for armor piercing, just in case he does bring greatswords. And as far as my mobile units go, I do have a group of Blood Knights and the Dire Pack. And it looks like we're about to get right into this battle here. So for my opponent, he has a little bit of a mixed and matched front line. He has some spearmen, some swordsmen mixed in with greatswords. Volkmar the Grim, he does also have a Celestial Wizard with Curse of the Midnight Wind and a Scroll of Power and a Scroll of Leeching, and a very heavy handgunner line in the back, which is pretty typical in this matchup. So aside from that, he does have some Cav over on the far side, some Empire Knights, which are a bit of an interesting pick. Haven't seen those guys in a while, but over here in the front, you can see these Sternsmen are going to jump in here, taking quite a bit of fire, but there is a little bit of obstruction. If you look over here and just get like, if you zoom down right down to eye level, like they have a little bit of an angle, but still only a few of them are probably going to be able to fire against this. So that was a good situation for me. So my troops are advancing in the front line, and you can see the mighty Ghorst trundling in with his 23 move speed, and some of these Cryptors are going to slam right into the back of these greatswords, which is probably the best case situation for them. But what my opponent wants to do, and what he is doing, is very, very well played, is focus down my Cryptors with his guns. That's like exactly what they're meant for. So they're just getting annihilated, and they got Curse of the Midnight Wind. Over here in the back, you can see the Dire Pack is able to kind of get around some of his troops. I do have the Varix Reavers out on the far side pressuring, so some Empire Knights and Spears are going to chase those guys. And I also do have Blood Knights kind of peeling through the seam right here. So he does have some Spears, which is very, very, you know, good play right here defending his back line. But the Blood Knights are going to collapse on these Empire Knights, and hopefully I can kind of put those guys down here. So in the front line, you can see the mighty Ghorst has been kind of chased by Volkmar the Grim is coming after him on his Pimp Cart, and it looks like they both got their own Pimp Carts here. Pretty cool. But I did summon some Graveguard to give him a little bit of defense, and I did have a White King as well that I failed to note because I was a little bit rushed in my introduction there. So the White King is going to kind of help push this guy off, and you can see that Warrior Priest over there waving his hammer over there at the White King, which is hilarious. So I'm just kind of sitting Helman Ghorst because he plays very similar to like a Mortis Engine, so having him in the front line is going to be good. And you can see my opponent actually does use the Banishment from Volkmar the Grim, which hits a bunch of my Graveguard, which is very cool. So I mean, that's a lot of value, getting a full group of Graveguard there. So in the back, you can see my opponent did take a little bit of damage here, but I believe he was able to kind of fend off my Blood Knights. So the Blood Knights detached, whereas the Hound stayed in fight, you know, but I was able to get over here and kill that cannon at the cost of my Dire Pack. So a little bit of a trade, but still, I think it's worth it because that cannon over the course of a long battle, especially if it started shooting at Volkmar the Grim, could have been very bad. So I did have some Skeleton Spears here in the flank, and I also did get my Necromancer to summon some zombies to bog down these Empire Knights, but I'm taking a lot of fire here, which is definitely not good, and he does have Spears and Auxiliary. So I immediately pull back, realizing it's probably not a favorable trade running into a bunch of Spears, and I'm like, let's just send my Skeletons in to kind of fodder those guys down. Over here in the front, you can see my opponent's Celestial Wizard using his Arcane Conduit and continuing to debuff my troops in the front line. I do get a pretty good Invocation of Nehek on these guys, and you can also see that the Helman Ghorst here did pop the Liber Noctis, which is, I mean, negative 60% ability recharge. Okay, so it actually refreshes your cooldowns as well on top of those other things, but he does take a lot of damage. You guys probably noticed that. He was losing quite a bit of HP there, but my Graveguard that I was able to summon were able to chase off those Greatswords, which is great. And even the Graveguard with the Sword and Shield that don't have heavy AP do pretty well against Greatswords with their anti-infantry bonus. So I do have this White King over here that's kind of helping out a little bit, and you can see the mighty Ghorst gives them some great stats. I mean, right now they have 44 melee defense and 30 melee attack, I believe, when buffed by him, so he definitely helps quite a bit in that respect. I also do pull some Blood Knights to kind of intercept Volkmar the Grim because he was doing too much work, and I just used my Necromancer in the back to kind of muck down these handgunners and other units in the back, which were applying a ton of pressure to me. So My opponent does have some Empire Knights coming back from the kind of area where they're fighting my Varix Reavers. So he did kill my Varix Reavers with some spears and some Empire Knights, but thankfully I was able to get in the back line and do a little bit of work. And the Necromancer is very self-sufficient. Like, you can just kind of sit him here and just spam summon zombies on top of himself, which is very, very good for kind of keeping him alive. So I do summon more zombies in the back because I realized I needed to keep pressuring his handgunner line, because if I just let them sit and shoot, it was going to be a really bad day. So I get some zombies here, and I also do have some skeleton warriors, which aren't summoned. They're actually just original ones. So I'm going to push them in here. The Empire Knights are going to intercept, so very well played to my opponent there. But in the front, it's going very well for me. You can see the Blood Knights and a lot of his front line has collapsed and is routing off. And the Blood Knights were able to get a very good surround, led by the mighty Ghorst and his pimp cart back here, just kind of waving his bell. He's such a ridiculous unit. So the Blood Knights are able to get on Volkmar the Grim, which is a large unit, and he is pretty heavily armored, but still the Blood Knights are going to be able to get through that with their anti-large bonus. And you can see they're just absolutely lancing Volkmar the Grim down. And he is unbreakable, so he's going to fight to the end. But I think my opponent realized that there was no getting away, and Volkmar was unfortunately just going to have to fight these guys to the bitter end. So he does get lanced off by the Blood Knights. Definitely very, very powerful anti-large units. Over here, you can see the Empire Knights are kind of fighting some of the Graveguard, and Empire Knights are probably one of the weaker cav in the game. Their stats are just very mediocre with 26 melee attack and 26 melee defense, but they do have decent charge for their cost, so they can get in there with a nice cycle charge right here. And some of these skeletons are probably going to get in here and do a little bit of work against these fodder units, but again, most of these are fodder units, and they're definitely going to start, dragging these knights off their horses eventually, because they only have 26 melee defense. And it looks like, did they actually just stop there, like right before this big epic charge I was preparing for you guys? So it looks like they do, which is, oh, I think a few of them got like caught in the back. So the Blood Knights definitely are not going to take that same note. They're going to get in there and just get a good little lancing here in the back. Although that charge looks a little lackluster too. Maybe some of them got caught up there. But regardless, that rear charge on those Empire Knights, they're going to be very heavily outclassed by those Blood Knights. In the back, you can see skeleton spears are over there, and I have some zombies and other troops chasing off the rest of his handgunners. So ultimately, I mean, Helman Ghorst did okay. Getting 2 full groups of Graveguard is pretty strong. Like, it's not terrible. Again, the big issue is his 23 move speed. So if you're playing against an opponent who's not, like, hero sniping you, so my opponent definitely, this was actually a game we played on stream, so he knew I was playing the Ghorst. It was an announced thing, so he clearly took it easy on me by picking Volkmar the Grim. If he had picked, like, more competitive Lords and competitive Lords of Magic, that could have been really rough. Like, I could have just gotten Ghorst sniped out. So thanks again to Dov Place for making it a fun thematic matchup. It was a great time, man. I had a good old jolly time. The Varix Reavers definitely got punished pretty bad over there in the corner. They just got, like, annihilated by the spears and other troops. But the Skeleton Warriors and the other, Graveguard in the front line, in conjunction with the 2 that I summoned with Helman, were able to push back his front line pretty effectively. Also, the Blood Knights were able to just do massive damage against Volkmar, which was very, very nice. So, again, well played to my opponent, Dov Plays. Look forward to seeing you again on Ladder Bud. We'll have some more fun, ridiculous battles, I'm sure. And, guys, thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed that one. More content coming soon. Hello everyone, it's Turin here, and today guys, I'm here with another Total War Warhammer online commentary. In this battle, I'm going to be playing the Wood Elves led by the mighty Durthu, and we're going to be facing off against the Vampire Counts. So this is actually a build I've been having quite a bit of success with against the Vampire Counts, namely because it uses a lot of monstrous units. Vampire Counts, traditionally speaking, what do they have? So they have Skeleton Spears, they have Blood Knights, and then they also have Terrorgeist, which have the kind of a typical anti-large bonus, but none of those are really great choices in dealing with these units, because Skeleton Spears, for example, if you're using Durthu and a Treeman in the front line, they're going to get mucked up on Eternal Guard and other frontline troops, and they're not really going to be able to get a good surround there. Also, they don't have very good AP, so against the very heavy armor of both Durthu and his Treeman, they're not going to do the most work. On top of that, a Terrorgeist is an okay pick, but Terrorgeists are very weak to Glade Guard fire, and they also do suffer against Eternal Guards who have both anti-large and armor piercing. So just generally speaking, the Blood, or I was going to call them the Blood Knights, but the Vampire Counts don't really have a bunch of good options at dealing with monstrous units in this matchup. That kind of, same goes for Chaos and, all those other matchups, and it's the reason why a lot of people have been using monstrous units against the Vampire Counts. So aside from that, I do have a front line of Eternal Guards mixed in with Treekin here, and Treekin right here are a very good choice against like Graveguard and things like that, because they do have that good physical resist. They're weak to fire, but you don't really need to worry about that too much in this matchup. So the physical resist here is 20%. On top of that, Eternal Guards trade very, very well for their cost with Graveguard. They do have an anti-large and armor piercing bonus, so the armor piercing damage on them is quite good if I'm not mistaken. It's actually, 20? That's pretty huge. On top of that, they do have 95 leadership, so, as you guys have probably seen in other matchups, terror routing and fear is very, very, a big issue against the Vampire Counts. So having that great leadership in conjunction with that very heavy front line, the large front line, is quite strong. In the back, I do have 2 Glade Guards with Starfire Shafts. They do fire damage, so against units that are weak to fire, they're going to be MVPs, and on top of that, they do have AP. I have a Treeman and the mighty Durthu, who I have stripped down. He didn't actually bring any spells from the Lore of the Wild. Sometimes it can be worth it to bring like a Flock of Doom or something, but today I just wanted to go really lean with him and then kind of, invest my resources elsewhere. So I do have a spell string with the Lore of Life in the back with the 2 healing spells, and that's pretty much it for my main ground army, but I also do have 2 Hawk Riders. I like Hawk Riders quite a bit for like scouting purposes, but more so I use them as like a counterattack unit. So I'm going to, you know, poke at enemy lords, do a little bit of harass damage, but you know, what I really like to use them with is like when Blood Knights, so he does have Blood Knights hidden over here actually, but when they do engage, I like to get behind them and then rear charge them with the Hawk Riders and pin them into my infantry or whatever they're attacking. And it's very, very strong, guys. So for my opponent, he actually did bring a Terrorgeist, so he does have some anti-large here. So if he can like get this Terrorgeist effectively on my Durthu or my Tree Man, it could be pretty scary for me. And on top of that, he did also bring the Strigoi Ghoul King. So this is a bit of an unusual pick, but the Strigoi Ghoul King is actually weak to fire damage. So against my fire arrows, he's going to take a ton of beatings. But he does have the Invocation of Nehek. He does also have Spirit Leech, Soul Blight, and the Command of the Unliving. So we'll probably see some Cryptors or Crypt Ghouls getting summoned. On top of that, he does have a front line of zombies here, some Graveguard in the back with some Skeleton Spears, of course. He does have a Necromancer here, so, you know, a lot of people aren't going to come in without, you know, the traditional Raised Dead, and it looks like he actually did. For a second, I thought he might have it on here, but he does have the full pimped out kit right here, so he does have the Unholy Lodestone, he has the Vigo Mortis, or Vigor Mortis, Vigo Mortensen, just Lord of the Rings up in here. Master of the Undead, all kinds of good stuff, and he does also have an Invocation of Nehek here, so some Blood Knights hidden up in the trees, and that's pretty much it, guys. So it's definitely going to be a fun, wild fight here. So right now, I just push in with these Hawk Riders, and I'm doing a little bit of harass damage because the Strigoi Ghoul King has about 90 move speed, and the Terrorgeist also has 90 compared to the 110 of these Hawk Riders. So I'm going to be able to kind of poke these guys down and not really have to worry about retaliation, which is quite nice if you just put them on skirmish mode. My opponent did have the Dire Pack, who do also have anti-large hidden over here in the brush, so definitely a little bit scary because in investing in these large units, I don't have a ton of like back line here, so I was really hoping I could contain my opponent in front of me. But these wolves over here with the Vanguard deployment is going to be pretty tough to deal with. So you can see the Strigoi Ghoul King actually taking a little bit of damage from that Hawk Rider fire, which is really nice early on. Just kind of poking him, stressing out my opponent, doing as much work as I can. Granted, he is going to heal pretty quickly, as you know most vampire units do. But still, any damage I can do and kind of forcing him into micro is always a good thing. So I do push up the hill here. I wanted to get like a little bit of a high ground kind of angle right here. You can see my arrows are firing in, and I soon will repath them onto the Necromancer. But in the meantime, just kind of kiting my opponent with these Hawk Riders, and I believe they do shoot while moving, so they will continue to shoot. You can also see I did turn one of my groups of Glade Guard with Starfire Shafts to shoot at them, and I did pull some spears to protect them in case my opponent decided to land. So things are going pretty well for the most part. The mighty Durthu and the boys are kind of getting ready in the front line, but I did pull Durthu and the Tree Men back because I had a feeling he was going to try some funny business and maybe try and dive me here, so I wanted to have my trees ready to just kind of do some slapping. So other than that, the Eternal Guards are going to engage in the front line and start lancing some of these zombies, and the zombies shouldn't be able to do too much, but the Tree Men here are also going to start beating down these zombies and hopefully do a pretty good job for me in the front. But, you know, he doesn't have that scary of a front line because the Eternal Guards will do well against the Grave Guard, and also the Tree Men are very, very resilient against these troops. You can also see that I do have my missile play coming in here and starting to poke in on this Necromancer, but my opponent did get a really nice flank over here. So some of his Hounds actually were able to sneak into the back line. I did have a Tree Man and some Spears back in auxiliary to defend, and I should be able to kill them quickly, but still, these Hounds hit pretty hard against lightly armored units, so he's definitely going to be able to lay a bit of a beating on some of my missiles here. You can see they're down to 41 models, even after just a second there, so very well played. He also does summon some Cryptors over here on the side. You can see that my missiles are fighting, and I do have some Spears over here that I was keeping defensively because I was kind of expecting that. And I do also have this big Tree Man who's definitely going to get in there and just stomp the yard with these guys. So, you know, the Cryptors are definitely going to struggle a little bit against the Tree Man, who, against unarmored targets, hits like an absolute monster. So he's going to get in there, and you can see the Cryptors are already starting to get worn down, and they do degenerate like most of those type of units do. So in the front, you can see that he did land the Strigoi Ghoul King and the boys, so they're getting a good rear charge, and you can see a lot of my Eternal Guards over here, my Tree Men, are starting to kind of get a little overwhelmed, and the Strigoi Ghoul King is a great duelist. You know, he's more suited for hitting like high-value targets. I would have liked to see him go after my caster with the Strigoi Ghoul King, but still, the Strigoi Ghoul King, it's a bit of a tongue twister just saying that over and over. He gets a decent little situation here, but the mighty Durthu is going to notice him shortly, and you can see Durthu has just been having his way, and he was able to just slay that Necromancer, just no mercy. And it looks like he was like frozen there for a second. He's kind of just standing there, but I do get a really good sandwich here on the Strigoi Ghoul King and kind of pin him down a little bit. But my opponent does come over here with these Blood Knights and gets a nice little charge. And but unfortunately for him, it was on Eternal Guard, which isn't the best choice. So he quickly realizes that and then goes into the front line, which is definitely a better choice. But guys, this is exactly what you want to use Hawk Riders for. So the Hawk Riders, you just use them to counterpunch. You know, just kind of use them as you would like a Muhammad Ali type character where you fly in. So my opponent comes in here. He gets to, you know, a great stylistic charge, hits my Eternal Guards in the back, which he definitely needs because he's very like congested here in the front. But then you bring in the Hawk Riders in the back with their heavy AP, and they will just absolutely shred these Blood Knights in this type of a situation. if I were to just engage in a straight up fight against the Blood Knights, and you can also see I do use regrowth on them to make sure they're kind of, you know, durable and fighting the good fight. But the Blood Knights are just getting torn to pieces right now. If we go ahead and look at their model count, they're down to 25 because the Hawk Riders, if anything, have really, really good AP and melee with 45 weapon strength. So they're able to just annihilate those Blood Knights. So that's definitely why I like them in this matchup. You can also see the mighty Durthu and some of these missiles are able to jump on the Strigoi Ghoul King over here. And yeah, I wish I could have shown you, but he actually just got the brakes beaten off him. So now Durthu's going to go after this Terrorgeist here, and he is just such a monster. Durthu is one of my favorite like duelists. He kind of like, I think one of the few units that can actually fight him like head to head is what's it called? Shaggoth, the Dragon Ogre Kolek, or Dragon Ogre Kolek, but the Kolek Sun Eater. So. But yeah, he's doing a great job here, kind of cleaning up a lot of my opponent's monstrous units. Now that the Strigoi Ghoul King is kind of out of the picture, the rest of the vampire forces are definitely going to start to rapidly crumble here. You can also see the Lamentation of Despair being shot in there, and I do have my missile line, you know, kind of moving up the hill here, so they're a little bit obstructed, so I wanted to get them on the high ground and set them up, and hey, at the very least, they can shoot while they're moving, and you can also see the Hawk Riders are going to go after this Terrorgeist who's trying to escape. Just a great utility unit. I really like Hawk Riders. I remember when the Wood Elves first came out, I was knocking them quite a bit, but I think they have, you know, a pretty good purpose, and, you know, in a lot of different matchups, like even against Empire, they can outrun any of the Empire Goon Squad in the air, and on top of that, they can also rear charge like Reichsguard and any of their Cav, and even against Demogryph Knights. As long as you don't engage them head up and you use them like this, like for example here, getting a great rear charge on top of Graveguard, who are a very heavily armored unit, they're going to do great in helping to crumble these guys. You can also see Durthu and these Eternal Guard who had come from Auxiliary are coming to clean up the front line. So well played to my opponent, quite a fun matchup. Hope you guys enjoyed that Hawk Rider play. I definitely think they're good in that matchup. I'd love to hear your guys' feedback on that. But he had some good plays, definitely, with these, the Dire Pack getting into my back line. The Strigoi Ghoul King is a very risky pick here. I think that was one of the big reasons why he struggled. I think he really needed Raised Dead. Like, Raised Dead, you know, summoning on top of my missiles, and just kind of a, you know, even like a Vlad von Karstein in the front line, just raising Dead behind my front line and then using them to go after my missiles. It would have been a lot trickier to deal with for sure. But regardless, well played to my opponent, Aquitaine UA. Look forward to seeing you again on ladder, and I hope you guys enjoyed that Wood Elf cast. Have an excellent night, and take care.